All right. Well, welcome everybody again to the Data for Change February webinar. Today's focus is going to be an introduction to data management and analysis. My name is Claire Devine. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a research associate at CORE, and I'll be with
Taylor Dorian, they, them pronouns, and I'm a data engineer here at CORE.
And before we jump into our regularly scheduled program, I actually am going to pop it over to Apurva to give us a brief introduction to Data for Change.
Thanks, Claire. My name is Apurva Samayazulu, she, hers. I am a program manager with CORE and the team lead for Data for Change. Because we may have some new faces in the audience, we wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk about who we are and what we're doing here. So this webinar is made possible by the Data for Change program hosted by CORE, which is a Center for Outcomes Research and Education. Data for Change is funded through Providence, Oregon's Community Health Investments. So through CHI, our CORE Data for Change team gets to partner with CHI-funded community-based organizations to grow their data and evaluation capacity for free. And then the next slide, please. So our goals through Data for Change is to work with community-based organizations, our partners, to identify key opportunities for process improvement, strengthen data capacity, to use data to achieve goals and improve outcomes, develop networks to foster collaboration and learning, surface best practices related to data, and to drive change in our organizations and in our communities. So what exactly do we do through Data for Change? Well, our partners identify specific data projects for technical assistance and get matched to 2 coaches from CORE who are experts in those areas. We host an annual in-person event called the Data Summit, which is a day-long conference designed around co-learning and improving data capacity. We host regular webinars, such as the one that you're here for today, focused on topics that are important to you. And we also provide opportunities for networking through in-person and online events. If you're interested in participating in Data for Change and are a CHI grantee, please reach out to myself or Abby Bush, who's our Data for Change Senior Product Manager. You can also reach out to Kyle from CHI and he can get us connected. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Claire and Taylor.
Thanks, Apurva. We wanted to start with our webinar objectives, which you may have seen in the email. We're going to be today introducing some high-level tips and tricks for data management analysis, mostly in Excel, but we also will be mentioning that Google Sheets will have a lot of the same functionality. If you want to go between them, you can either Google it or we have some resources at the end. That's going to involve learning some concrete ways to approach data management, cleaning, standardization, and then also things like conditional formatting, crosstabs, and pivot tables. So our agenda, we'll just have our introduction, our land acknowledgement, and our acknowledgement of Black History Month. We'll move into data management, do a demo on the sample data set, and then crosstabs and a sample there. I wanted to mention that today we'll have a little bit of a different format. We're going to spend less time looking at the slide deck, although we'll have a couple of slides, and more time doing that demonstration. That means we are recording the meeting today, and we will make sure that after the meeting, there's the recording available. There's also the slide deck, which will have a lot of the information that we're going over and the sample data set. So don't worry about taking notes on a lot of the details. That'll be both in the slide deck and in the recording. We always start, if you've been with us for webinars before, we always start with our land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from across the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their wills, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. This session is presented today on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use the plentiful natural resources of the area. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brought us here today. In addition to our land recognition, we also wanted to kind of expand the normal acknowledgements and appreciations that we do and mention that February is Black History Month. This is a time to honor and celebrate Black history and culture. Some information we wanted to give: the Association for the Study of African American Life and History selected a theme every year since 1928, and the theme for 2025 is African Americans and Labor. There's a quote that we wanted to share from Lana Sweeting, who's a Black cultural library advocate and program specialist senior. There are so many ways to interpret the theme. Black people throughout the diaspora have contributed work of all kinds in the US and the world. This work includes the agricultural labor of enslaved Africans, organized labor movements, and Black businesses, to name a few. Obviously, an important counterpoint to the theme of labor is one of rest. As we learn and comprehend how far and wide the reach of our influence is, we can all have a better understanding of both the past and the future. As we do this work, I'm also hoping that we can take a break from those labors and support each other and ourselves. And we just thought that in this moment, it was important to, do the acknowledgements and appreciations. And if you go to the next slide, we do want to point out that obviously land acknowledgement and Black History Month information are just starting points. Things you can ask yourself are how do I plan to take action to support Black, Indigenous, and other people of color or BIPOC communities? There's some examples of how to act. There's supporting culturally specific organizations by donating time and money, supporting BIPOC-led grassroots change movements, and then educating yourself and others on issues surrounding the BIPOC community. We've got a couple of links there as well. And then we just were wondering if in the chat you wanted to introduce yourself. You can include your name and pronouns, maybe the organization you're from, and then the Indigenous lands that you're currently on. If you're not really sure, we have another link there that will allow you to enter your location, and it'll tell you the Indigenous lands you're currently on. So please do that, and we welcome everybody here. And now I will turn it over to Taylor. Oh, no, I won't turn it over to Taylor. I'm going to tell you about the 2 upcoming Data for Change events we've got after this. Like we mentioned, this is our February webinar. We also have one coming up on March 20th at the same time. That will be focused on data visualization in Excel and Sheets. And then in the one in April, we'll be a little bit more interactive. We may ask for suggestions of things people also want to learn that aren't covered in today's webinar or the next webinar. So that one's coming up as well. Now I am switching it over to Taylor.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, so today we're gonna focus a little bit on spreadsheets, which I know can be scary and overwhelming to some folks, but we just wanted to take a little bit of time to introduce it as a topic. Probably a lot of you already use them, so some of the information we're gonna cover might be a little redundant, which is fine. Anything that we cover that you love, feel free to chime in the chat about. But in the meantime, just spreadsheets in general, I think got their start initially as like a budgeting tool, and that's great. They do fantastic things with numbers. I actually use spreadsheets fairly regularly to engage in things that I refer to as data management. So cleaning data, combining data sets together, converting data values. So we're going to talk about some of that. And then later on, Claire's going to walk us through some pivot tables, which I think are really great and would be, it's going to be exciting. So as Claire mentioned, we are going to do a lot of demonstration in an actual data set. The data set itself is kind of made up data. So when you get it in your hands, don't bother analyzing it. I mean, you can obviously, but don't make any assumptions about the data you're seeing because it's made up. So before we look at the data, though, just to talk a little bit about data management and then spreadsheets some more. So if you ask 10 different people what data management is, they're all going to have a different response, which is great. Data management means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm specifically talking about it in this case with these 4 sort of concepts in mind. So profiling is taking the moment to look at the data to understand what you have, what the structure of it is, what the quality of the data are, and how you might be able to use them. And another bucket is validation and cleaning. So when you're looking at your data, you're looking for the structure and quality. Maybe you're finding that there are issues with the data during that profiling step. And so you take the opportunity to apply some rules to clean data. You can also reshape data using a spreadsheet tool that can look any sorts of ways. You might want to move columns around or rows around. You might remove columns or rows. You might add columns or rows. Just whatever, like literally reshaping your data so it looks different than what it originally appears to be. So those three things we're going to talk about today. We were also going to do some recoding stuff, but I ramble a lot and that was way too long. Nobody has enough time to hang out with me to talk about that this time, but that'll be in an upcoming webinar. So recoding is the idea that you can take a value and make it mean something else. A common example is you get a scale, scores that are on a scale, they're numeric 1 through 5. What does 1 through 5 mean? When you're looking at it, who knows? So then you take that opportunity to apply a human readable label to each number so that then you can more easily understand, oh, 1 means not at all, for example. So spreadsheet tools, the two most common spreadsheet tools are Excel and Sheets. I think that probably 100% of the folks, maybe not 100%, but close to 100% of the folks here today are either using Excel or Sheets. It's, as I said, they started out as a spreadsheet tool, but it can be so much more. There are so many features and functions that you're never going to learn them all. I've been in Excel for the last 20 years, and I actually just learned a new to me function a couple weeks ago. It was super exciting. So don't pretend that you're ever going to know anything, or hopefully you'll know something, but don't pretend that you're ever going to know everything. That's an unrealistic expectation. And Claire mentioned the things that we're going to talk about today are within the context of Excel, but anything that we're showing you in Excel can be done in Sheets. It's not going to be the same. So the steps we walk you through in Excel aren't going to translate to Sheets, but that's where you can bring in the internet to sort of do that crosswalking for you. Or better yet, this is a great example of when it could be good to use an AI tool, a Copilot or a ChatGPT type tool. You can have a conversation with the AI tool saying, hey, I've got this date of birth and I need to calculate the age. If you ask the internet, you could get some examples, but it might not be specific to your spreadsheet. And so then you'd have to sort of extrapolate from the responses on the internet. But if you ask the AI tool, you can be more specific saying, hey, my date of birth is in column F, and I want to calculate the age in column H. And it can give you the actual formula with that information in it that you can then plug in. And the great thing about it also is you can have an iterative conversation where you go back and forth with it. I sometimes fight with Copilot a lot at work when I'm trying to get it to tell me what code I need, and I recognize that, no, that's not quite right. I actually need this instead. So you can have that conversation. For just quick overview of spreadsheet, there are columns which are across the top left to right. They're all referenced by alphabetic values. And then there are rows that go down, and they're all referenced by numeric values. Excel as a spreadsheet can support a lot of data. Please never have as much data. Do not max the capacity of Excel. That's way too much data. You're not going to be able to do anything with that much data. And then the combination of where the column and the cell, or the column and row intersect, is called the cell. So you can see in this, you can see in this picture here, the column B row 1 cell, referred to as B1, is highlighted. So that's what I mean when I say cell. Just to call out on the slide. Whew, I got there. I sometimes also refer to columns as fields or variables. I use them interchangeably. I apologize. I'll try to be specific about columns, but if I slip and say fields or variables, I'm referencing the columns. And I do want to also call out this red circle here. I'm going to be clicking that a lot. That's just going to select all the data in the sheet. You can also do that with Control A if you like keyboard shortcuts, but if you see me do that, that's why I'm doing it, is to just select everything. So last slide before we sort of dive into the actual data. I do want to say that it is sometimes really overwhelming when you're looking at a spreadsheet, and that is a feeling I have all the time. And so a strategy I've employed to sort of work through that overwhelm to get where I need to go is to figure out where I need to go first and then sort of work backwards from there. So figuring out what you're trying to accomplish at the task with the task at hand, and then figuring out, okay, this is what I need to do. Do I have everything I need in order to do that? And if not, what am I missing? And then if I have everything that I need in order to get there, does it look like the way I want it to look? And that's sort of where we're gonna start today. Is if it's not looking quite right, there's some easy-ish things that you can do to get it looking the way you need it to look. So this is our data set. We're going to take a quick minute to orient ourselves to it. But before we do that, absolutely the first thing that I recommend doing before you do anything with data is make a backup of it. You can make a backup a lot of different ways. Just like any other thing I'm going to show you, there's probably like 2 or 3 or 5 or 1,000 ways to actually do it in the tool. So the way I do it isn't necessarily the only way, but it is a way. So I'm going to take a quick backup by just selecting all the data, Control C. I'm going to click down here for a new tab, and then I'm going to Control V to paste the data. I'm going to right click on the tab, rename it, and I'm just going to call it something like OG for original. And that way, if I accidentally make a mistake in anything that I'm doing, I know that I don't have to be super anxious and devastated that I've ruined everything for forever because I have these data backed up. So I'm going to click back into my original data and see what I'm looking at. So right away, I can see that some of the values are sort of obscured and the column headers are not big enough. So I'm going to select everything and I'm going to auto size that by double clicking with my, I don't know if you can see where my cursor is. I've got the double-sided arrow and I'm just going to double click. And now my columns are all wide enough that I can read everything. That's exciting. I'm also super distracted by this column B because that font does not match anything else and it's kind of shouty at me. So I don't like that. So I'm going to make it look like the rest of it using my conditional formatter. Not my conditional formatting, that's something else. My format painter tool. So I'm going to select the value of the format that I want to paint. So I'm just going to select column C because that's what I want to apply. And so then I'm going to click this format painter tool here, this little paintbrush. And then I'm going to apply that paintbrush to column B. And so now it has taken that format from column C and made it look the same in column B, which is much better. Also sort of looking across now, I want to sort of see what I'm working with. It looks like I have a participant ID, which is great. Anytime you're using a data set, it's a really good idea to have an ID because it sort of uniquely identifies the row at hand. But I see that they sort of aren't necessarily ordered, which is a little distracting to me. So we're going to take a look at that. But before we look at that, I'm also looking across the rest of the fields and I'm seeing there's a lot of demographic information and then starts to get maybe into some program data here, some dates and maybe some scores to a survey or something. And then over here, it looks like, oh, a few more demographic fields. I don't like that the demographic fields are split, so I'm going to highlight them and I'm going to move them to the rest of the demographics just so all my demographics are together and then my program data are at the end. I'm going to do that by Control C to copy them. No, actually, I'm going to Control X to cut them. And then I'm going to come over here. I want them to be between the program. No, I actually want them to be right here between the household size and the program field. And I'm going to sort of make them fit. If I Control V right here to paste, it would actually paste over the existing columns. So I'd lose the column that says program and the start date, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say insert cut cells, and that's actually going to shift everything over. So I've sort of reshaped my data by moving those columns over pretty quickly, which is making me happier because now all the demographics are together. But getting back to that program ID or the participant ID and it being a different order, I want to sort of talk a little bit about how you can sort. So the participant ID, I want to make sure, I want to check this as an ID. It's a signifier of whether or not your data are unique. So I want to see if there can be multiple IDs for a given row or a given multiple rows for a given ID even. So I'm coming to the sort and filter section on the home tool taskbar, whatever, ribbon? It's a ribbon. I think it's a ribbon. And I'm coming down to custom sort. You can do it quickly, just one column at a time here, either ascending or descending order. But if you click into this custom sort, it gives you a lot more features. And I think this is a really powerful way to look at data is by combining different ways to sort. So you can sort multiple columns at once. So I'm coming in here and it's column A, column B, column C. That's a little confusing. That's not what my column's called. So I'm realizing that it hasn't checked that my data has headers, but it does. So I'm going to click that box. And then when I come back in here, it's now telling me what the columns are actually contain, and that's much easier for me to understand. So I know I want to sort by participant ID, and then I want to add a level to sort by another field. And that start date field is kind of interest to me. I want to see if there are multiple dates for people. Maybe this is over time and you have a longitudinal thing, so it makes sense to have multiple rows for people if they're coming in on different dates, but I don't know if that's true or not. So I'm going to select the start date as my second sort field. I do want to call your attention here. You can actually sort, so we're going to sort on the values, but you can actually sort based on the color of the cell or the font of the cell, which is super cool. And or if you've done some conditional formatting, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you can sort based on that conditional formatting. And then you can also, similarly to sorting ascending or descending, you can sort smallest to largest. And this is kind of cool. It recognizes that the date of the start date field has dates in it as the data element. And so it's allowing me to sort oldest to newest or newest to oldest. I actually like the default, so I'm going to keep it like that. And as we click that OK button, we can see that our data, the participant ID values are now in descending order. And the start date, it looks like, if I'm looking, I'm seeing that there's some like repeat participant IDs. So I'm checking now to see if there are different or same start dates. And it looks like they're all the same, which maybe just means that these are duplicated data. Sometimes that happens. We can take care of that later. What else am I doing? I wanted to also talk about filtering. So filtering is a great opportunity to do some profiling of your data. You're seeing these data for the first time maybe, and you don't actually know what the values of each field are. So a quick way to be able to do that is to filter. So if I come back to the sort and filter icon here and select filter this time, you're going to see across row 1 where my column names are, my column headers. You're going to see that it adds little drop-down boxes. And that's kind of cool. You can click into the drop-down box, and this shows you all of the values that are within that column. So these are the unique values across all the rows in this column. And if you have thousands of rows, this is a really great way to, rather than eyeball it and try to remember all of the values you see, you can just do it here. You can also select and deselect the values. Maybe you want to see, for example, how many non-white participant you have in the data. So you can do that by deselecting a value. In this case, I deselected weight. And now I'm seeing that some rows are hidden. And I can tell that right here because it goes from row number 1 to row number 4. So the data didn't well, they did disappear. They didn't get removed, but the rows just automatically got hidden when you filtered, when I filtered. So if I want to see them again, I can come back. I know that I filtered on race because it has the little funnel icon thing. So if I click that again, I can either select all, and then it'll give me back the white checkbox, or I could have checked specifically in the white. And now I see that the rows have unhidden themselves. You can do it also in this box. Like, let's pretend we want to see a few of them at once. You can deselect the select all, and then select the ones that you want to see. So let's say Spanish and Russian only, and then you can filter to that subset. So that is sort of how you apply a filter. And I'm going to now clear my filters, and I'm going to actually, the little drop down thing, it clutters it in my mind. So I'm actually going to remove it because I'm done filtering. I now have a sense of, if I was really profiling, I'd probably look at all the values in each column, but I have a pretty good sense of what's happening now. So let's say that you wanted to, now that you know what the values are, you wanted to maybe highlight a few rows or do something to do a little data validation with. Maybe you're super interested in this data to see how many participants are in really big, have a household size that's on the larger side rather than the smaller side. So you can do that through something called conditional formatting, where, oh, I do actually want to back up 1 second. Sorry. This is important. I would go on, but this is too important. When you sort, you want to make sure that all the data that you're sorting are being sorted together. If I were to sort just on participant ID, you might imagine that if the data were, here, let me actually go back to my original data. Okay, if I were to sort just on participant ID and have it sort ascending, one would come up to this row. But if I didn't select all my data to sort together, one would be here, but then the rest of the information on this row would stay here. And so now I've assigned the wrong ID to the wrong information about the person. And that would be a catastrophe because it just would. So make sure that when you are sorting, you bring all your data together and they can all sort at once. Okay, moving back to the conditional formatting, we're trying to find household sizes greater than 5. So we're going to come to this conditional formatting tool. And this actually has a lot of preset filters in it. I just, for the sake of this webinar, learned some of them. I traditionally do my own thing, but I actually just found this one. So it's definitely worth poking into each of these little areas rather than just doing one and doing it for the next 20 years the way I do. So in this case, I can see that greater than is already a pre-selected value, and I'm looking for household sizes greater than 5. So that doesn't look great. So wait, I don't like that at all. Okay, we're going to start again. This time we're just going to select the data that we want to format rather than the whole spreadsheet. And we're going to see if this looks better. We're going to greater than, nope, still don't like that. Okay, we're just going to do this is how I spreadsheet all the time. I trial and error it. So we're just doing household size. And we're coming here and we're saying greater than, okay, great. So now it's preset to 4, which is actually great because I wanted to see household sizes 5 or greater. So it's doing a light red fill with dark red text, which sure, whatever. I could change it if I wanted to, but you know, it's giving me a sense of how many of the household sizes. And then because my spreadsheet or my data set's kind of small, I can just sort of eyeball it. But if I wanted to, I could now sort and bring those colored cells together the way I showed you could before. So that's kind of cool. Another way that I like to use conditional formatting, and the traditional way I've used it, is sort of as a data validation piece. So I'm going to highlight these 2 cells. These dates, I know sometimes data entry errors or other things can lead to your end date being before your start date. And that's generally speaking not something that's plausible. So that can be a sign of data quality issues that might need to be fixed. So to do a quick check to see if that's true, we're going to conditional format this with a rule that we're just making up. There might be a format where you can do this already, and I'm just not familiar with it. So I'm going to do it the way I've done it, which is create my own rule. And I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. I apologize real quick here. I'm going to do something that maybe doesn't make sense, but we didn't have enough time to talk formulas, so you'll have to come back to the next one in order to learn why I'm doing it if you don't understand it. But I'm going to basically look for column N is my end date, and I want to see which of column N happened before my start date, right? Because I don't want that. So I'm going to do this quickly and not explain it and feel really badly about it, but hope that you come back next time so that you can learn a little bit about why I've done it. But I think actually I want one, not two. And so I'm telling it what to check for. So in this case, I'm saying check for column N that happens before column M. My end date is before my start date. And then if it comes back as sort of true that my end date is before my start date, now I'm going to tell it how to format it. You can format it differently here. There's some different options. You can change the font or put a border around it or what have you. I'm just going to make it red because red is, in this case, not a good thing. And I want to have somebody stop and pay attention to it. So I'm doing that here. And then I'm saying, OK. And then I'm scrolling down and not seeing anything, which means that I made a mistake because I know that I put something in there that's wrong. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to manage the rule and I'm going to edit it and I'm going to change this to 2 because sometimes it needs to be 2 and sometimes it needs to be 1 and it never is consistent. No, that's not right either.
I think the dollar sign.
Oh, yeah.
Check the dollar signs.
Yeah, I put the dollar sign in the wrong spot. So again, it's something that I will explain next time. Thank you, Sarah and Claire. Okay, no, that's not right still.
Ooh.
Oh, this is because I changed it back to 2. Okay, we're almost there, I promise. I'm gonna edit. This is gonna go back to 1. Okay. Sorry about that. Clearly not a professional. So in this case, I'm looking at this information here that has been formatted red and see that 12/27/24 in fact comes after 1/17/24. So this is a thing that I think we're all familiar with, especially at the turning over of a calendar when somebody forgets that the calendar changed and you need to go back or you need to update your year. So I could easily fix this. And if I fix it by making it a 5, because probably it was actually January 17th, 2025, my value is no longer red because it's no longer meeting that formula that I checked for because the end date is no longer before the beginning date. And I'm really excited about that. So did a little bit of data validation in that way. As a final thing I wanted to talk about today is sort of the notion of deduplicating your data. Deduplicating data, I've worked with, I think, some people on the webinar to deduplicate massive data sets across multiple programs, siloed data. It's a lot. It can be a lot. It's not for the faint of heart. But there are some quick ways that you can use a spreadsheet to do it once you figure out what your business rules are for deduplicating data. So you don't want to necessarily just deduplicate willy-nilly because sometimes it's okay to have duplicate values. So it's a really good idea to understand what your business rule is for removing any data from your data set before you remove it. And sometimes that decision is in your hands. That's somebody else's decision. So it's a really good idea to, if you see duplicated data and you don't know if that's okay, try to figure out if there's somebody who does know if that's okay and then have that conversation with them But in order to deduplicate, there are actually two ways. I just learned, Claire taught me one the other day. That was super cool. So I'm going to I've highlighted all my data. I'm going to come to the data part of the ribbon. And I'm gonna, this sort and filter is here too, just because Microsoft likes to have it multiple places apparently. But in this area, there's a few more options, including this advanced filter. If I click into the advanced filter, I can click here and say unique records only. And this is basically an advanced filter. I mean, it's in the name, isn't it? Where it's comparing all of the information across all of the rows and hiding the rows that have the same information as another row. So again, I haven't removed the data, I've just hidden them. And I can tell that by looking over here where my row numbers go from 2 to 4, and then from 4 to 6, and then 6 to 8. So 3 and 5 and 7 are all hidden. So that is the trick that I already knew. I'm going to Control Z to undo what I just did. And show you the trick that Claire just taught me. So my trick, I'm just hiding data. If once you are prepared to be deleting data, you can do that as well with this thing right next to the advanced. There's this little thing called remove duplicates. And you can come in here and sort of expand this. Sorry, I hit my mouse. Oh, wait. I'm bad at it. Pad. I can't. Okay. No. Okay, I'm not going to expand it. If I had a real mouse, I would expand it and show you all the things. I'll just scroll down. You can see here that this is sort of similar to when you're filtering. You can select all the things or deselect all the things. In this case, I'm pretty sure, based on the last step I did when every other row of the first 10 rows got hidden, that those rows are truly duplicates, and I don't need duplicate data. That actually might screw up the counting and the sort of summary statistics that Claire's going to walk us through. So I'm actually going to remove the data based on the participant ID. If I wanted to be super careful and make sure, if in case there was a start date that was different for the same person, I could also select the start date. So by selecting both of these, if the same participant ID had multiple start dates, both of those rows would be kept. So I'm just being a little bit cautious. And then I'm assuming this is the OK button, but I can't actually see it. And I'm going to do that. And it's telling me 10 duplicate values were found and removed. So again, if you just accidentally deleted data that you didn't intend to delete, that's OK, because we made that backup originally. But in the meantime, we feel pretty good about this, and we have now deduplicated our data set, and we're ready to do some analysis.
Really. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to switch back to the slide deck for just a couple of minutes. Go through. But yeah, so Taylor went through ways to kind of clean up your data. Let's say you've done all of that. You're pretty confident that you have it all kind of how you want to do it, and you're ready to jump into analysis. And we're going to do a little bit on that, focusing mostly on crosstabs. So the idea of a crosstab, this particular type of table, is when you want to look at your results on a more granular level. So you're not just looking at, what did my survey respondents say about program satisfaction, but you're looking at things like program satisfaction by race or ethnicity, or program satisfaction by gender. You can do this to look for relationships that may have been unnoticed, that may have been hidden by just looking at kind of the aggregated results. So you're trying to disaggregate it, you're looking at it in a little bit more detail. Cross tabulations, also called contingency tables, are showing the relationship between two variables or survey questions or fields. So you'll have them as your rows and your columns, and then you can also focus or filter by another variable. So that's what you're going to be creating in Excel or Sheets. I have a very serious example to share with everybody. You've surveyed all of your, You've surveyed all of your pets, and you wanted to know if your pets like going on walks. And indeed, 77% of all of your pets are really interested in going on a walk. You could report that. Or you could say, wait a minute, I think I'm gonna look at this in a little bit more detail. Maybe I will, change this to looking at it by dogs and cats. And so you kind of separate it out, you disaggregate it, and you're able to see, oh, actually, when you look at it this way, if you look at who's very interested in the walks, it's mostly the dogs, 98% versus the 2%. Or if you look at like just the cats, if you're looking at the column, you can see, oh, only 10% of the cats are interested in going on a walk. So you're able to see that relationship because you've looked at it in a little bit more detail and you don't try dragging your cat out by a leash, which might not work out well for you. So that's the idea of why you would want to do a crosstab and kind of how it looks. Before you jump into creating your pivot table, which is essentially just creating your crosstab, it's what Excel calls it. You might want to do a little bit of planning for your analysis. So thinking about what do I want in my columns? What do I want in my rows? And what do you want in each of those that I'm going to go through? So you have your columns that you want to think through. You're going to have the row variable that you want to think through. Then you're going to want the values. So this is going to be related to what Taylor was talking about, knowing how many unique survey respondents, unique participants you've got, but then you can think about, do I want to see this in just straight numbers, the 45, 1, 46? Do I want to look at row percents, which is, looking at those very interested in walks, how does it break out between dogs and cats? Or maybe you want to look at it in column percents, which is looking at the column of dogs. How does it break out between very interested and not interested? So knowing where you want to go with that is going to be really helpful. Also thinking about if there's a filter that you want and you don't see it in the table because it's not like specific to the table itself. It's a little bit outside. If you have multiple programs that you're looking at and you want to be able to do this analysis, dogs and cats versus walks, and you want to be able to look at it versus each program. This is where my metaphor breaks down, but we'll see in the demo how you might use a filter. But planning that out can be very helpful. And now for the analysis. Okay. I'm gonna learn this mouse. Oh boy.
Good luck.
Yeah. All right. So I want to know. This is the data, but I want to. Okay, wow, I really don't know this mouse at all. In any event, so I've created a new sheet. This is what I like to do. You can do it different ways, but create a new sheet. You go up to insert and you see where it says pivot table. And all you have to do is just select pivot table. And Excel needs to know what data you're referring to. So it's asking you the table or the range. And there are two ways to do this. You can either go over to your little arrow, click it there, and then you would navigate into the data and you would select it. Oh boy. And you would, I'm selecting it wrong because this is not how I'm going to do it. So that's one way to do it. You would select it, you would press enter, you would tell it okay, and it would create the pivot table. One thing I like to do though, so before you go into your new sheet and create the pivot table, I like to name this table. So I'm going to select the whole table just like that. And I'm going to go over to home. Oh, it doesn't show up as select. Oh, because I'm going to try selecting it again. There we go. So I've selected it, I've gone over to home, and I'm going to go up here where it says format as a table, and I'm going to click down on it, and it's going to ask you for the formatting, which is not the part I really care about, but you can, select however you want it to appear. You say okay when it asks you if that's the range you want. And it's made your rows different colors and all of that. But the point that I want to make is that up here where it says table design, there's a table name part. And the default name is table 1. If you have multiple tables, you'll get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can name it whatever you want. I think you have to avoid spaces, but table 1 is perfectly fine. I'm going back into sheets. I'm going back to insert. I'm doing my pivot table, and it's asking me for my table. And all I have to do now, because I've named it, is type in table 1. And I press enter. And it thinks. And there I have a pivot table, and that is an unuseful pivot table. But you see it, all you have to do is click into it and you'll have this pivot table fields pop up on your right. And you can see the top part has a list of all of your variables, and then the bottom part we're going to use in about half of a second. So this is where your planning ahead is going to be useful, because you've already decided, you know what, I wanted to be able to look at program satisfaction, which I know is, down here. Wanted to look at program satisfaction, and, I want to look at it by gender. So I'm going to click these two, and you see how they appeared down here in the rows, which, technically works, but is not exactly how you want your table set up. In fact, you want your satisfaction to be the rows, but you want the gender variable to be over here. And now you look at your pivot table and it's set up. Actually, that's kind of the way I want it, but you don't have any values in the cells. So you go back up to the top, and this is where it's very important that you're looking at unique participant IDs. So this has already been deduplicated. You're not going to be counting multiple people twice. You click this. In this particular case, Excel put it where you want it to be, which is down in values. You take a look at your table and you go, I did not survey 820 people. I did not get that response rate. And that is because Excel, for some reason, I do not understand, likes to default to sum. So it is adding up your participant IDs, which is not what you want, but it's very easy to fix. You see the little drop down right here? You just click it and you go to value field settings, and Excel gives you a whole bunch of options, but the one that you will probably always use, or I've only ever used, is count. So now it's just counting the number of folks that you've got in each cell. And it looks a lot better. 40 seems right. That's what we had before. And you've got your thing set up. At this point, that is your pivot table. That you've got the rows, you've got the columns, you're counting in each one, and now it's all kind of icing on the cake, where you can, go in and think about the way that you want to have things shown. For instance, I don't like the order of this. I wanted it to start with very satisfied, end with very dissatisfied. It's in a kind of weird order because Excel has alphabetized it. So I click on very satisfied, I right click, and I decide I want to move very satisfied to the beginning. And very dissatisfied is at the end. Neither is in the right place, but satisfied is not in the right place. So we're going to go to move again, and we're going to have to move it up a little bit. This can be a little bit annoying, but it's not too bad. So you can move them around so that they are in the order that you want them to be. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing I told you that you could do is do a filter. If you want to filter by program, maybe you want to look at satisfaction by gender by the program. So you go back to where it has your pivot table information. And if this ever disappears, it's because you've clicked out of your pivot table, just FYI. So all you have to do is click in any cell in your pivot table. It brings it back up, and you select program, and it again puts it not where you want it to be. So you go over here, you drag and drop, and you put it into program. And now over here, you have this filter row come up. How much time? And you can select. You can decide you want to select multiple items, which is just nice to see it in general. Or you can unselect them all and say, I just want to look at my access to housing program. I want to see how that falls out, and you can compare them across. You can just take a look at them. You can use them to explore, and then you can go back and you say, actually, I want to look at all my data. That's one thing. The other thing to share is that, this is giving you kind of raw numbers, which, can be helpful. You can sort of see, okay, like if I look, across at very satisfied, we've got a fairly equal mix. Satisfied, there's a little bit of a difference in numbers. But the problem is that if you're looking at numbers and you're not like making all the connections, right? You don't know how it's filling out with like percentages. So what you can do, and I want to make sure I'm clicking in the right place, and I'm not. Click up here at the very top left, right click again, and it'll say show values as. And again, this is all in the notes. You'll be able to see this. It tells you where to click and what to do. And you can decide how you want it to appear. Right now, there's no calculation. It's just telling you the numbers. You can look at the percent of the grand total, so the percent of 40 for each cell, or maybe there's something that you want to see. Maybe I want to see how satisfaction ranges within each gender category. So I'm going to say percent of column total. If I wanted to see the breakdown of gender in each satisfaction category, I would do row total. In this case, I think probably the column percent makes more sense. So I'm going to click that. And you see it, and it doesn't like blanks because it's a divide by zero problem, but it gives you the percentages. So now this is a different way to look at it. But you're not happy with your table because now you have all these divide by zeros and it's not very good. So you're going to go into row labels, click the drop down button. Before I do this, what I'm about to do is I'm going to filter out the blanks. So that all you have, you take away the blanks from the rows and you take away the blanks from the columns. I'm going to say that there are times where you might want to include the blanks. You might want to know that, all of the people who did not put down their gender were very dissatisfied with the program. Like that might tell you something. Like there's reasons to have that in your data. If you've gotten to a point where you've looked at all of that, you've decided you kind of know what's going on, and for instance, there's nobody in either, like there are no blanks in either, so I just don't want them appearing in my table. There might be a situation where you decide you're not going to look at it. So you can go in there, you press the drop down, you unclick the blank, and now you don't have it in your row anymore. And you can do the same for your column. You go in and you unclick the blank because you don't have anyone in that category, so it's okay. And you unclick it again, and now you have a fairly pretty table. And I'm going to just make sure that those are the other, that there are always a couple other bells and whistles that you can do, but this gives you a general idea of kind of how to approach a pivot table. And it's nice because pivot tables can be intimidating. I know every time I have to do them, I have to be like, okay, wait a minute, what do I need to do? Is it complicated? Where do I click? It's actually fairly easy to go into a new sheet, create one, and then use this very helpful pivot table fields to create it how you want. And if you start to do the bells and whistles stuff, if you want to see it in a particular way, this is a very good thing to Google. If you can't remember particularly where to click or why you would present it in one way or the other, that's the kind of thing that you can very easily find online and reference. But that is my summary of how to do a pivot table in general. I can't see the chat massively well, but if anyone has any questions, certainly put them in the chat. We also wanted to let people know that we have a survey that will be put in the chat. And in addition to giving us helpful data, which we then can put into pivot tables, in addition to giving us helpful data, there's going to be a question there about if there's anything that you wanted to see. So if there's anything that in kind of Taylor's section on managing data or in managing data or cleaning it, or maybe something about the pivot tables, like I've always wanted to be able to create the table so that it looked a certain way. That's a great opportunity to put that in the chat. We have that third webinar coming up in April. And we might have some time to kind of put all of the assorted things that people want to know, to have a second to let you know about those. But we are definitely going to be sharing that fake data set, so you'll be able to play around with it. As Taylor mentioned, it's not going to have like deep meaning, but it's a great way to practice. And then, yeah, our next data webinar is going to be on data visualization. It's going to be a really great presentation on all of that stuff. But we have a couple of extra minutes, so if anybody had any additional questions, that's a great time for that. But we really appreciate everybody coming and
Yeah.
listening to us ramble about Excel and data.
Hopefully it was not a waste of anyone's time.
We really appreciated having everyone here.
Yeah, thank you very much.